Okay, thanks.
Any place? I don't know. Do you want, I'm gonna go out and go over there. I'm gonna go around. Like this.
676. Yeah. And Rich? Oh, wow. Okay, I'll remember that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, no. Oh, yeah. Well, that's
You, Rachel, and my sister, and my So I looked up now I need to send
Yes, I'm just trying to find.
and I'll see if I know. I know they so I gotta do that. At least
Mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gift of spirit our beloved Dan gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of his light and his warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage, and in the fullness of time, healing and peace. Today we come together in this place for a holy purpose, to remember Dan and join our hearts together to give comfort and strength to his family. Mourning is a time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Dan's life with the millennia-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. The child asked, "Tell me of life." And the sage answered, "Life, my child, is a mystery. We do not ask to be born, nor do we even understand the meaning of birth, of creation. We grow and we experience life's pleasures and pains. We love, and slowly, oh so slowly, we come to realize that we have become, that we are. At that moment, we humble ourselves before the mystery of life and quietly say, though I knew not, I have been granted the most precious gift of all, the gift of life." The child asked, "Tell me of death." And the sage answered, "Death, my child, is a mystery. It is the inevitable return of the gift of life, the gift which came free to us. We live as the trustee of that mysterious being, of that unexplainable becoming. Yes, you and I are but the trustees of life. We nurture it, we delight in it, we give of it to others. And at the appointed time, we sadly, yet with pride, return it from whence it came. The beauty, my child, is that what we are, what we have become, remains long after the gift has been returned. It remains as a precious keepsake with our loved ones who live on. Let us pause for a moment of silent meditation, reflecting on the memories of Dan that we each carry with us, the memories which will be a blessing. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo achsar, binotesh sheyarvitzeni. Al mei menuchot yinahaleni nafshi yeshoveh. Yancheni v'magle tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki elech b'geit zamavet, lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha meshantecha, ema yenachamuni. Ka'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sororai, Ishanta v'Hashem roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai le'orech yamim.
Right here.
Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Esaenai el heharim me'ayin yavo esri Esaenai el heharim me'ayin yavo esri Esri me'im Adonai Oseh Shamayim va'aretz Esri me'im Adonai Oseh Shamayim va'aretz. I lift up my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your guardian, God is your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. God will guard your going and coming now and forever. And let us say, Amen. We turn now to the opportunity to share special memories and reflect on the legacy of Dan's life. I invite his lifelong friend, Michael Miller, to come forward and share with us.
Rabbi Stein, my friends, last night, as I was thinking of what to say today, I could almost hear Dan's voice whispering in my ear, "For God's sake, Michael, whatever you do, keep it short." Dan hated pomposity and overlong speeches, but there are a few things I feel I need to say. It's hard to believe. Time has passed so quickly, but I first met Dan when we were students in the 5th grade at Templeworth Kodesh Religious School. We became fast friends, and that friendship would last for more than 70 years. I never had a brother, but Dan was as close to me as any brother could possibly be. Dan and I both decided to go to Syracuse University. Dan on a full scholarship. Student in the toughest school at the university, the School of Architecture, where his talent and creativity were soon recognized. That talent and creativity would manifest itself in his work for the town of Brighton, designing the original library, the police and courts building, the Department of Public Works facility, and right here, the remarkable education wing of Templeworth Kodesh. He leaves a lasting legacy in these buildings. But far more than the bricks and mortar, his most important legacy was his legacy of love. His love and devotion to his wife and soulmate, 53 years, Carol. His love of his children, Scott, Julie, and Lisa. The pride in his grandchildren, Ariel and Eli, and his profound affection for his twin sister, Judy, of blessed memory, her family. Dan was the best friend anyone could ask for. We spent long hours in the Fybush home at 154 Croydon Road, our gang from Monroe High School. And his parents were so wonderful, Eddie and Al Fybush. And they were always ready with sound advice and counsel as we went through those awkward teenage years. And they were friends of ours for life. Dan was the best friend anyone could ask for. We would have long talks about life. When we were young, we talked about women and sports. As we grow older, we spoke about business and politics. And more recently, we had what Dan, with his dry sense of humor, would call organ recitals. This organ works, that organ not so well, that other organ not at all. He loved rare steaks and would often tell the waiter, I want it so that I can hear it hit the plate with a move before it hits the plate. And he rooted every year for the Detroit Tigers. Never mind that they had not won a World Series since 1984 and almost always finished last in the American League. He still cheered them on. And someday, if the Tigers ever win a World Series again, I know Dan will be smiling down. When I had my battles with depression, Dan would call regularly and insist on my leaving the house and his taking me out to lunch. I didn't talk too much on those occasions, but just his presence and knowing he cared so deeply meant so much to me. During his mercifully short final illness, visits by friends and family, and most especially Rabbi Stein, comforted him. And a special thank you to Rabbi Stein for those visits. The last time I saw Dan, he could only manage a weak wave goodbye. Now it is my turn, and I must say goodbye to him. I will do it with a word we learned in 5th grade in Temple Frith Kodesh Religious School. Shalom, shalom, peace to you, my dear friend. Death be not proud, for Dan shall live in our hearts forevermore. Thank you.
Scott, please.
It seems unfair somehow to try to describe my father in words. Words were not his medium. He thought in spaces. He took his old-fashioned pencil and his T-square and his three-dimensional thoughts, and he turned them into a house for his sister, a house for me, in addition to the temple. As Michael, as Bunky just told you, DPW garage, a library. Can you imagine being 7 years old and your dad is designing the new library for your town? How cool that is. I took any chance that I had to ride over with him in his little MG, and we watched the steel and the brick and the drywall go up, all of the signage that he painstakingly designed, the furniture that he positioned just so, and then would go back and move when they tried to move it. Watching it all turn into an actual permanent building that would be there forever. Nothing, as it turns out, lasts forever. Not the library, not the steadiest of habits, not my dad. There were a lot of things that he didn't talk about much. One of the things that he especially didn't talk about much were his earliest years. He and his twin sister Judy were born, oddly enough, in Seattle, Washington. His parents worked for Lerner stores, which moved them back and forth from New York City to Syracuse, and then eventually settling here in Rochester when he was 10. Once he had a place to call home for good, he became the most deeply rooted person that I have ever known. In almost 75 years, he lived at only 3 addresses in Rochester. He made the same toast every morning, a ritual that somehow eventually lasted an hour and a half, 2 hours, into lunch. He found his life's passion early on, and he never wavered. Not architecture, that was a job for him. Auto racing. Auto racing was the passion. He was just 13 when a neighbor took him to watch cars race through the streets of Watkins Glen, and he was hooked. For almost 70 summers, the Glen and its schedule were the fixed points that the year revolved around. I started going with him when I was about 6. I met Rick Mears and Mario Andretti and Paul Newman long before I was old enough to be impressed by any of them. My son, his grandson Eli, started to join us and was admitted to that little circle once he was old enough. And Dad's happiness was a quiet one, even in a place as loud as the track. As Eli quickly learned, he always let Pa set the pace. He would walk around the paddock and the pits for hours, rarely saying a word as he took his careful pictures of whichever cars caught his eye. You moved from one fence over on this side to another one across the track and then up to the bleachers. And then you drove to the bottom of the track and you pulled out the folding chairs and you sat some more until he decided that it was time to stand up and go. It was a schedule he never felt the need to explain. We did it without complaint for most of my life because it was a rare chance to be inside of his world. He loved his own cars, all of them, from his very first Corvair to the Porsches, of course, to the GTI. Everything except one, the Chevy Vega, that was, of course, the first car of his that I could ever remember. I learned many of my curse words from him early on watching him play. We saw a lot of baseball together. As Michael mentioned, his team was the Detroit Tigers, a quirk he never really explained to me. He never lived in Detroit, but he got to go to the old Polo Grounds and to Ebbets Field as a kid in 1940s New York. Much later, I got to take him to Shea Stadium in its last season. Go Mets. Fenway Park, several day trips to Cleveland, and so many Red Wings games. He always had a hot dog and fries. He always had extra packets of salt tucked away in his shirt to make sure the fries were properly salted. And one time we took a road trip all the way down to Queens just to go get a pastrami sandwich from a deli that was closing. Come back the next day. His basketball team and all of ours was, of course, his alma mater, Syracuse. We watched almost every game on TV as a family, teaching Ari and Eli to root for the Orange everywhere except their other grandparents who were Michigan people. When the Orange were losing, Dad would be there in his chair muttering quietly at the TV. In fairness, when the Orange were winning, Dad would pretty much be there quietly in his chair, muttering at the TV. He was a man who found the place where he wanted to be, and he saw no good reason to be moved from it once he was there. Which didn't mean that I didn't try. For years, one of the things that he did verbalize was his regret about never having visited Europe. 5 years ago, I decided to fix that. I told him we were going to go to Germany, we were going to see the Porsche factory, and he wasn't going to say no. So he didn't. And then he added England to the itinerary because there was this Formula One museum in the north of England, and so we might as well then spend a few days in London first, right? I'm not going to tell you that in those 2 weeks abroad that he opened up and told me all the things I wish I knew about what he was thinking. It was enough just to spend the time with him at 5 different car museums, plus a racetrack, and a Formula One team. And he even went along with me for a tour of the BBC and enjoyed it. And his extensive expertise at sitting in a chair for long periods actually served him very well in his first transatlantic flight. Just that. 9 hours later, we were in Iceland. And he did. He got to Iceland for 45 minutes. We changed the plane. We shared it. There are so many things about Dad that we never got to talk about and that I will never know now. There are also so many things, though, that I know about him that he never needed to say out loud. He took a great and quiet pride in his kids and his grandkids, in his devotion to his parents and his sister and her family, all of his friends, and most of all in his 53 years with my mom. At the end, of course, she was there with him every single day. Every time I would leave, we would exchange just a very few carefully chosen words. I'd kiss him, I would tell him I would love him, and he would say the same. It was enough. I love you, Dad.
Thank you so much, Scott. And Julie, I invite you to come forward.
I don't like public speaking. That's something I have in common with my dad. Sometimes I don't even think he liked private speaking. My father and I had other things in common: an alma mater, an appreciation for well-done French fries, his with very excessive salt, a dedication to NPR and PBS, a serious love of Syracuse basketball. Over the past decade, we watched every game together. We talked basketball as recently as a few weeks ago. I told him which SU grads were playing in the NBA, and he told me that Jim Boeheim will never retire. My dad and I also shared what could be described as a dry, sarcastic sense of humor. When he was in the hospital in August, a nurse came in and asked him if he knew who he was. My father said yes. She then asked him his name. Harry Potter, he replied. This was surprising, not for the sarcasm, but for the fact that he even knew of Harry Potter. He and I shared a true love for dogs. He was a big fan of my dog Phil and would usually ask about how Phil was doing before he would ask me how I was. He always told me to give him a scratch under the chin. In the last several months of his life, Phil was one of the only things that truly engaged him, made him smile, and even got him outside for a walk on a few occasions. We also shared a love of music. While I'm more a fan of popular music, he always preferred classical music, except for one time in the 90s when he saw a concert on PBS, of course. It was the Eagles' Hell Freezes Over tour. He was so excited to tell me about this great new band and asked me if I knew of them. Yeah, Dad, I know who the Eagles are. I don't know how to end this, so like I usually do when I need to find the words, I turn to music. I didn't find anything from the Eagles that fit the situation, but I did find this. I thank you for the music and your stories of the road. I thank you for the freedom when it came my time to go. I thank you for the kindness and the times when you got tough. And Papa, I don't think I said I love you near enough. The leader of the band is tired and his eyes are growing old, but his blood runs through my instrument and his song is in my soul. My life has been a poor attempt to imitate the man. I'm just a living legacy to the leader of the band. I am the living legacy to the leader of the band.
All three of you have given us a very special gift today. Let's take a moment to allow these loving words to rest upon our hearts. Friends, we are gathered together today during the festival of Sukkot. Over these last few days, since Dan's journey came to an end, I have been fascinated by the intersection of these two events. The primary element of Sukkot is a building project. And specifically, to build the sukkah in a way that makes it fragile and exposed. There are even teachings that say that if the sukkah is so well constructed that it stands up to storms and high winds, then it isn't valid. Dan, of course, was a visionary and gifted architect whose creations endure. Generations of students have come into the school building he created for us here at the temple. Generations of learners benefited from Dan's work in visiting the library. And countless families found beauty and security in the homes that were built and expanded due to Dan's talent. His legacy looms large because of all that he accomplished. The holiday of Sukkot also urges us to live with openness. And this too is a fitting foundation for today's sacred gathering as we remember Dan's spirit. Dan always lived life on his own terms, whether it was enjoying his Porsche, a good steak or burger, following the daily news, or most importantly, the growth and accomplishments of his children and grandchildren. Dan had a very special passion for life that was both intense and understated. I pray today that all those who knew and loved Dan will be blessed with comfort, strength, and peace. Each of you had a special connection, and Dan always saw what was unique in you and what you uniquely needed. I was blessed to spend some special time in conversation with Dan during these last several weeks. The family and I concluded that somehow he would talk more with me than with them, to the point where I would text and say, just had a great conversation with Dan, and they would write back and say, are you sure you were in the right room? During this time, Dan never wanted to talk about himself, other than the briefest of acknowledgement that his decline was a challenge for him. Rather, he wanted to know that his family was safe and secure. And he was eager to hear all about the latest activities and developments here at the temple, a place where Dan had a lifetime of faithful and generous commitment. He loved our traditions and history, and he will be missed. In the early books of the Bible, we read a mention of the first ever architect named Bezalel. The description of him says that he was endowed with a divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge. Now, I'm confident that Dan would urge me to stop and even raising the comparison. Nonetheless, I celebrate today that we were blessed with the presence of a man who used his prodigious talents and skills to strengthen our community. A man whose legacy will endure through his family, his friends, and all those who journeyed on life's path with him and were inspired by his example of curiosity and kindness. May the memory of Dan Fybush be for a blessing, and may he rest in peace. Amen. We pause once more, allowing each of us to remember in our own way. At this time, I ask you to rise for the recitation of the memorial prayer. Male Rachamim, Shochen B'Meromim, Amsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim U'Tehorim, Kezohar Harakia Masirim, Et Nishmat Daniel ben Ephraim be'Eden shehalach le'olamo, Ba'al harachamim, Yastirehu b'seter kenafav le'olamim, V'yitzror hachayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, V'yanuach b'shalom al nishkavo, v'nomar Amen. Fully compassionate God on high, to our loved one who has entered eternity, grant him clear and certain rest with you, in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold Daniel in the embrace of your wings, secure his soul in eternity. Adonai, he is yours. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. At this time, our prayers come to a close. I invite those who will be serving as pallbearers to please make their way up to the front of the chapel. We'll then receive instructions from the funeral directors.
Thank you, Rabbi. And I would invite everybody to follow right behind the family.
I'm not going to the funeral. I don't want to do that. I don't want to. If you insist.